think an EU consolidated tape gets so much attention and press here in Europe, yet there isn't a lot of evidence that there's a lot of work being done to bring it about?
The concern really across the industry is that the MiFID regulations for post-trade transparency were open to different interpretations. And as a consequence, understanding what trades occurred off of the order books of the regulated markets, meaning the MTFs and exchanges, depending where you are and what information you have access to, you get a different view of the activity that took place. The second thing that we've learned through MiFID is that the rules under which you're supposed to report are again open to interpretation. So as a consequence, for example, there's been quite a lot in the press that OTC is 40% by activity and by volume of European trading. But actually, if you understand the numbers, it's less than 10%. And this is really because the post-trade transparency regulations of MiFID allowed inaccuracy, double reporting, didn't really go down to the level of understanding how post-trade information is reported. A good example of this will be where a broker-dealer offers a customer a guaranteed VWAP trade. Actually, that prints twice. So the volume is inflated twice.
I've heard a lot of this, the why there should be a consolidated tape. But, I mean, at the meeting, I heard that there weren't a lot of people that raised their hands that said they're actually working on this. And that a lot of people mentioned to me that there might have to be a mandate. So, I mean, how is a consolidated tape actually going to come about for Europe?
So as an industry, by that I mean the sell side of the industry through AFME, we agree that a consolidated tape makes sense to address the concerns of investors that can't see it. Let's not forget that the last post-trade print informs the next trade. So the last post-trade informs the next pre-trade. So what is happening about that? What we've been working with Brussels, our colleagues in regulator and Parliament, is to allow the industry to come together and try to describe and formulate what a mandated consolidated tape would be. And if I give you an example of why it's important to engage the industry, I'm sure your readers will understand. If the mandated consolidated tape is, let's say, one physical entity, and let's say it sits in Paris, does that make a disadvantage for those people that want to reference it from Germany or from Brussels or from London, because their access will be slower than those in Paris? So you pretty quickly get to some of the fairly logistical aspects of a mandated consolidated tape. But stepping back from that, first and foremost, the reason that this is difficult is because it's difficult, being blunt. First and foremost, the tape is only of any value if the data that is going onto the tape is accurate and uniform. And we don't have accurate and uniform rules or standards today. So the first step in a mandated consolidated tape is gaining agreement across the industry, from buy side through sell side, through operators of venues, exchanges and MTFs, data providers and systems integrators, to agree on the standards.
How is that agreement going to happen?
So at present there's an industry group which is being formed. The reason it's taken a little bit of time is it can't really be driven by the sell side, because there may or may not be some interpretation that it's being driven to the benefit of the sell side. Similarly, if the exchanges and MTFs drive it, there could be the misinterpretation. So what we in AFME are doing, and it will be in the public domain shortly, is creating, with the likes of FPL and other organizations, an industry working forum, including the regulators, where we will try to describe and agree amongst ourselves what is the mandated mandatory consolidated tape. Physically, what is it? Is it a company? Does it physically exist somewhere? What is the technical infrastructure that it relies upon? How do you get to consume the mandated mandatory consolidated tape? Is it redistributed through data vendors such as Bloomberg and Reuters? If it's physical and you live far away from it, are you somehow at a disadvantage from others? So what you will see over the next weeks is the forming of essentially a non-partisan cross-industry working group, which is totally independently managed, that will grapple with these aspects of the tape. What are the data elements that need to be uniform across Europe to make the quality and accuracy of the data correct first and foremost?
I mean, you mentioned this group's going to be formed within a matter of weeks, but then how long do you think it's going to take this group to come up with a solution?
It's a good question. I think there are some elements. I don't want to preempt the views across the industry. My personal view is that there are some elements where we all hold the same understanding, that the data going in, it must be thorough, complete, and accurate. I don't see that we'll have any difficulty agreeing those elements of it. Where I think it will get perhaps a little bit contentious is that part of the regulatory drive is to provide this consolidated information on an equal and free basis. So how does that work when actually the vendors of the data today charge quite a lot of money for this information? So if we look at the vendors of data, be they exchanges, MTFs, or data redistributors, this is a very large amount of their revenue. So how does one create a mandatory consolidated tape where there are commercial implications? Not so much for the investment banks or the buy-side community, but certainly for the exchanges. How does one engage with the exchanges in a way that deals with that concern for them? How is it funded? Whatever it happens to be physically, who pays for it? How do they pay for it? How much will it cost? So how is it governed? I guess is probably a very important point. If this is essentially developed by the industry for the industry, how does it get governed? Probably not one particular community.
I mean, in looking at these questions, do you look to the U.S.? I mean, when the consolidated tape was first mentioned, it was called the U.S. style consolidated tape, but now it's sort of the trend now in the U.S. to question the benefits of it, and there's a lot of firms are going into direct exchange feeds. I mean, with this European tape, is this going to be purely European, or are you going to look to the U.S. to see how that's structured at all?
So it's a very good question. Of course, we've been looking at the experience in the U.S. to try to learn from what's happened there. Direct exchange fees, if I may sort of pick up on that point, for those organizations that want to be as close as possible to the trading information, then they will always go to the direct exchange feed. That a consolidated tape by definition will be one step of indirection from going directly to the source. But let's not forget that the consolidated tape is a combination of multiple different pieces of information across buy-side, sell-side, and exchange. So for those firms that need to go directly to exchange, they will. It doesn't obviate or in any way undermine the value of a consolidated tape as being the single representation of activity. So if that answers the question, it's not an either or, it's both.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.